Spend your Labor Day weekend at the Soldier Hollow Sheepdog Classic, presented by your local Utah Toyota dealers. It's 4 days of family fun and exciting competition featuring the world's top sheepdogs. More info and tickets at soldierhollowclassic.com. Don't miss Extreme Bull's Last Chance coming to Nephi, Utah, September 30th. See top competitors as they ride the meanest high-flying bulls around. Visit UtestampedeRodeo.com. UtestampedeRodeo.com.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us for the KSL Greenhouse. Maria and Ton with you this morning. We're taking your calls and questions for the final half hour, 801-575-8255. You can also text us at 57500. Next listener is wondering, Ton, when they can trim roses.
Trim the flowers after they're done flowering. If it's a hybrid tea, go back to the first set of leaflets with 5 leaflets. Mm-hmm. But for the major trimming, you want to wait until late October, early November, after they've either been scorched by frost or dropped leaves. But even then, I would just consider maybe cutting them back to waist height and then getting some like bark mulch, either small or medium chunk bark, putting it around the base about a foot up around the branches. That way, if we get a really hard winter, you have some protected branching down there that the rose will recover from. But you do your major pruning to where you're cutting them down to thigh or knee height sometime in mid-March.
Okay. Next listener says they have a lot of tomato plants, lots of tomatoes, but unfortunately they're cracked and about half of the tomato is hard, yellow, or tan. What's going on? What can they do?
There could be a few things. The cracking is most likely from weather. That rain we got 2 or 3 weeks ago, hence your yard being a jungle, caused some uncontrolled growth in tomatoes to where the tomato grew so fast that the skin couldn't keep up and it cracked.
So it's not something I'm doing wrong either? Because I have the same problem, actually.
But the multicolor on them, it could be a couple things. There's a physiological condition called coring, to where the center of the tomato, and then it almost looks like fingers coming out from the center, are really pithy and off-flavored. And you'll see some discoloration of those tomatoes where the coring comes to the edge, but they also could have mosaic virus in there that is causing that.
I can just cut that off, though, and eat the rest.
The mosaic virus, you just get rid of because they'll be off-flavored. But if it's coring, you can cut the pieces out. But some varieties are more resistant than others. And if you have been growing a variety, there's one I grew a couple of years ago that was just touted as this great tomato, and I got it, and it had coring for 2 years running. Celebrities are less likely. I grew one called BHN 1021. That was less likely to get it, but it's just really variety dependent.
All right. Next caller is Mary in Provo. Good morning, Mary. How can we help you?
I have a question about Roundup. We'd like to spray it on the edge of our driveway where weeds are growing, and it's connected to the street. But we are concerned that when water comes down, and not very often, but if people are watering their lawns or something, it'll go in the gutter. Do we need to be concerned that would go into our water supply?
No, once it's dry, there's going to be very little risk of that happening.
Great. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your call this morning. One of our callers dropped, but this person, Jody, had asked about pumpkin and squash that have died off and turned yellow and died, and what do you think is happening with that?
We need a squash bug song.
So it seems like you've answered this question, I don't know how many times today, but everything that's happening with the squash right now seems to be a result of the squash bugs.
It really is.
Not
80% of the time you're seeing squash decline July, August, September. It's usually squash bugs. And it's really hard to treat them right now because they're big. There's lots of squash bugs, and you don't really want to be nuking your plants with harsh chemicals to kill them because then you can't really use the fruit for a number of days. And it's just something that I discourage doing. And so monitoring is just critical through mid-June, through mid-July when the plants are smaller but putting on a lot of growth. And you can do even just a little bit of spraying then or try maybe some diatomaceous earth around the bases with monitoring to kill them out. But if you'll kill them earlier in the season, you have much better luck later on.
All right, Kate in Payson is asking, she has a pine tree that's, or 11 trees, 40 years old. The branches are starting to turn orange, and she's wondering if they're dying.
Maybe. She needs to look, if they're true pine trees, for pine needle scale. the easiest thing to do would be to do an internet search of USU extension and pine needle scale to bring up pictures to know what's going on. There could be some drought stress in there, but if they're true pine trees and not spruce, the number one thing right now taking them down is the needle scale. Could also be some drought stress.
All right. Next caller is Greg in West Jordan. Good morning, Greg. What is your question?
Hi, I have some grass growing in my yard that it started out as a small circle of, not actually a circle, but a small oval of grass. But it's not really grass. It's got a stem, and then it branches out to a bunch of little grass-type things. And I pulled it all out and reseeded, but now it's like 4 foot across again.
So is it just staying in a tight circle, or do you see runners going out, a foot, 2 feet away?
No, it's going everywhere now.
You might have quack grass, which you can never get rid of all the roots. And so you slowed it down, but it's kind of like a bad penny that, just keeps coming back. So one thing that you can try doing is spraying it out now with Roundup, because you don't want that spreading everywhere, or else it'll become your lawn.
Yeah, it's already got to where it's almost 5 feet out from where it was.
Yeah, spray it out, make sure it's dead. You may want to wait until spring to do any reseeding just to make sure that it doesn't come back, because it can sometimes come back 2 or 3 times after it's sprayed.
So how did I get this stuff?
It came in through irrigation or wind.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just till it all and redo it in the spring.
Greg, thanks so much.
Don't till it until you've killed it.
Yeah, I made that mistake. I pulled out that small foot-around piece and seeded it, and now it's gone to like 5 feet away from where it first started as a small.
Just make sure it's dead.
All right.
Appreciate your
Thank
call.
you.
Have a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Next, bye-bye. Next listener, Ton, says they replaced their grow boxes with a mix of compost, commercial bag manure, topsoil. Extension Services tested this for them and shows that they don't have enough nitrogen, but they don't know what to do. What is the solution? What do they add for nitrogen?
The Extension Service soil test always tell you you're deficient in nitrogen, because you probably are, because nitrogen's so mobile in the soil that it flushes out quickly. And so slow release fertilizer or a liquid fertilizer every couple of weeks will offset it.
And when would be the best time to do that, and how much per square foot?
I'll follow the instructions on the bag, and there's no time like the present.
Okay, do it now. This person's been listening for decades, and it's given a moment of silence for Larry Sagers, and thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Next caller is Carla in Taylorsville. Good morning, Carla.
Yes, good morning. I appreciate your show.
Thank you.
I am a 80-plus gardener that is hungry. My husband got me 2 tomato plants, and the ants and the hornets and everything out the front were so bad that I brought them in and put them in the utility room window on the north of the house. And I'm looking at them right now, and they've shriveled up and died, and I'm hungry. What can I grow in a window on the north side of the house, and that's edible? I surely appreciate your show, and I remember when I picked up my special ribbons at the state fair, Bart gave me some produce from his garden, and he's more senior than I am, so how can I keep up with all the master gardeners and that? I'm hungry. Please make it happen.
All right. Well, Bart's been working at it for many years.
He has, and he's a talented gardener. One thing I would look at is maybe some greens, some salad greens, because that's just going to be too much shade for most vegetables besides maybe some salad greens. So I would consider that, but a north window just isn't really that suitable for growing vegetables unless you wanted to put some grow lights or fluorescent bulbs over the tops of the plants.
Right. That's a really tough one for even a great gardener.
It is. And then one thing that I would do is maybe look at getting some dwarf tomatoes. There's several of them out there. Micro Tom is one that you can get online. You'd have to grow them from seed.
Hi, this is Stephanie Palmer, KSL News Radio Director of Sales, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. Did you know that last month alone, KSL Radio had more than 200,000 podcast downloads? If your business is trying to reach more people, we can help. Let's talk about it. Text the word podcast to 57500. Thanks. Now get back to your show.
But they are going...
Thank you for joining us for this final segment of the KSL Greenhouse Show. Let's try and squeeze in as many questions as we can. Ton, next person says that they have State Street maples that they planted a couple of years ago. They have excess peeling and cracking in the outer bark, and many have died. They want to know what's causing this excess cracking and peeling in young maple bark, and the cracking is taking place on all sides of the trunk, and anything they can do to help them.
It sounds like winter sun scald to me, to where the south and west sides of the trunks will happen as they peel. And because the sun heats the bark up, and then the bark will expand and freeze, and the just kind of peels off the trunk. So on those trees, I would check the watering also, just to make sure that they're not being drowned, because that's maybe also sounds like something they're being maybe overwatered. But I would wrap the trunks up in the winter with tree tape that you can purchase from any garden center or farm store starting, now through October. Leave it on from October to March and then take it off.
Our next person is asking, is there any such thing as a taproot-only tree, or do they all send out those horizontal feeders?
They will send out a few taproots to anchor, but the 90% of the root mass on any tree is in the top 2 feet of soil, because that's where the water and nutrients are.
Well, the reason they're asking this is they want to plant something in their parking strip, and they don't want it to raise the sidewalk.
Smaller trees like seedless crab apples, fruitless crab apples, some of the flowering cherries,
How
hawthorns.
about a tricolor beech, they're asking?
Tricolor, that's not going to do well in sun. It's just one, they're beautiful trees, but it needs shade, and even then it will scorch in the middle of the summer, and it might take 50 years, but it eventually get too big.
Okay, so tell me again your favorites then.
Spring snow crabapple, royal raindrops crabapple are both pretty much, you can consider them fruitless. Weeping or Quonset cherry might be one. Several of the hawthorns will get some fruit, but the fruit doesn't drop until winter. Anything that's going to stay about 20 to 25 feet won't heave the sidewalk.
All right. The next person has forsythia bushes planted about 36 inches apart. Is it allowable to bend some of the long branches over onto the next one and then tie them together with nylons to help fill in the hedge?
They'll eventually fill in. But if you
I've
wanted,
never heard of anybody even thinking of trying that.
You could put in some bamboo stakes and then just bend the branch over for a season to force it. Eventually, those, for as beautiful as those forsythia are, their growth habit is, just for lack of better descriptions, wild and woolly. And they go all sorts of directions.
They're kind of everywhere, yeah.
But if they do that, they're going to want to use a technique called renewal pruning once they're filled in, so that they can keep the blossoms.
Okay, Lisa in West Point is asking, is it okay to transplant a miniature lilac bush in the fall? Not as if you want it to bloom in the spring, right?
If the leaves have dropped, you can move it, but it may not. It'll take a few years to recover. And if it's been in the ground for 20 or 25 years, it may just be cheaper to get a new lilac.
She also wants to know if she needs to prune her weeping cherry. It's overgrown. Can she prune off some of the long tendrils?
She can. I mean, a few right now, but mainly wait till mid-March. Okay. And when you prune that, don't just give it a straight cut all the way around to make it look like a lollipop. Cut those branches so that some are a little higher, some are a couple feet down, so that it maintains a more natural look.
Next person says they have a fiddle leaf fig, and it's infested with fungus gnats. Ick. What's the best way to get rid of those?
It's getting too much water, and they need to check the drainage to make sure that water's draining out. The way to get rid of them is just to dry the thing out. There are some insecticides like Natural they can order online that may help. But if you have lots of fungus gnats, it's a sure sign of too much water. It
seems like the favorite question of the day has included moths of some sort. This person says they have white moths in their lawn. What's the best way to get rid of them?
It's probably sod webworm and just any insecticide registered for lawns. They don't need to spend a lot of money. Treat once a week for 3 or 4 weeks, because they don't have an absolute life cycle. So you have eggs, larvae, and adults present at once.
Next person planted a peach tree last spring. This year is the first year it's had fruit. They didn't have a lot of fruit on it, so they didn't prune it, but the peaches have gone hard, and they haven't gotten very big. They say they've watered it good. Is it normal for a new peach tree?
It is, and they should probably be pulling that fruit off for the first 2 years anyway. So next year, let it blossom. Once you start to see some fruit set, pull the fruit off. Let it get established, and on the third year, you can start taking fruit because you want to get those roots established and get strong branches. If you start taking fruit off relatively, immediately, the tree life is going to be shorter because the branches haven't developed properly.
Mm-hmm. And you can check out all of the things that we put on our Facebook page. Check out the KSL Greenhouse Facebook page. You can see the Japanese anemone, the fall blooming anemones, a great article on those if you want something new to plant in your yard. And how to grow big peaches, a great article on that. And Ton, it's been a great day.
It's good to have you back.
Try this. It's good to be back. Let's try this again next week.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ton.